The message from the stars arrived less than an hour after the silence dissolved. It was clean, clear, and steeped in a formal galactic common that felt ancient. It was addressed to the government and people of Earth, and it was a torrent of gratitude, awe, and profound apology. It spoke of medals of ultimate valor, of technology exchanges that would catapult humanity forward 1,000 years, of an immediate and honored seat on the Galactic Consensus High Council. It promised ships, clean energy, cures for all diseases, the secrets of the stars. And at its end, a single repeated question humbly asked, "How? Please instruct us." The message was received by every major government on Earth simultaneously. Panic, confusion, and a frantic global scrambling began. Who had done this? How? Military and intelligence agencies tore themselves apart looking for a secret project, a hidden genius. They found nothing but a series of bizarre data glitches and an unauthorized use of an old launch facility. The world's leaders, their minds reeling, began drafting careful, diplomatic replies, trying to claim responsibility and navigate this new, terrifying reality. The ones who had actually done it heard the galactic message in the warehouse. It played from Jay's laptop, translated through his own rough software. They listened in silence as the grand offers poured out. When it finished, no one spoke for a full minute. Tay was the first. He snorted, a dry, dismissive sound. "Metals. They want to give us shiny rocks." Yuna nodded, looking at her grease-stained hands. Their technology. It would make all of this pointless. She gestured around the warehouse, at the salvaged parts, the tools, the things she had built with her own mind and effort. Why fix anything if you can just ask for a new one? Ji-Hai's voice came through the speaker, thoughtful. They want to know how so they can put it in a formula, so they can control it. But it wasn't a formula. It was a reaction. Min-Su leaned back in his chair, the doctor in him analyzing the offer. They are trying to treat us as patients who have performed a miracle. They want to study us, to make us part of their orderly system. But our system is disorder. That was the point. Jay, who had dreamed of alien technology his whole life, surprised himself. He looked at the code on his screen, the beautiful, chaotic mess that had broken the silence. If we take their perfect tech, we start thinking like them. We become civilized. And then the next time something like the silence comes, we won't have the answer either. We'll be just like everyone else who said no. They looked at each other. A mechanic, a doctor, a hacker, a scientist, and a soldier. They had not set out to save the galaxy. They had set out to solve a puzzle, to throw a wrench into a machine that was breaking everything. They were not heroes. They were just people from a difficult world who were very, very good at not dying. Then we tell them, Yuna said simply . So they wrote their reply. Not as a government, but as the 5 people in the room and on the line. They used the same back-channel frequency they had used before. Jay sent it, a small, stark data packet aimed at the everlasting bloom. On the flagship, the bridge was alive with a soft, celebratory hum. The crew moved with a lightness that had been unthinkable hours before. They were alive. High Chair Ilvina awaited the formal response from Earth's governments, ready to begin a glorious new chapter of cosmic friendship, when Officer Kale alerted her to the incoming signal on the secondary. Channel the Deathworld's own frequency. She felt a tremor of anticipation. This would be the true voice, the genius behind the miracle. The message was brief. Again, it was not polished. The translation was better this time, but the tone was unmistakably direct. It began not with a greeting, but a statement. You called. No one else answered. We did. You called us Deathworlders. Remember that word. Our world is not kind. It tries to kill us every day. Gravity is heavy. The weather is violent. Life competes fiercely. We are adapted to crisis. It is our normal state. You saw our solution. It was not a weapon of your science. It was a tool of our environment. We used chaos, poison, and stubborn life. We use things that do not belong in your peaceful universe. To you, it is contamination. To us, it is another Tuesday. Do not send us your perfect technology. It would make us weak. It would make us forget how to fix things with scrap, how to heal without a machine, how to fight when hope is gone. Do not give us a council seat. We do not want to govern your peace. Your peace is beautiful. It is also fragile. We saw it shatter. Here is all we ask. Do not quarantine us. Do not fear us. Do not put us on a pedestal. Open the door. Let us see the stars, not as guests in your perfect ships, but in ships we build ourselves, with our own hands and our own messy, fighting spirit. And understand this. If you call again, and again no one else answers, we will. Not because we are heroes, but because we are from Earth. And on Earth, we do not go quietly into the gray. The message ended. There was no signature, no request for recognition. The bridge was silent once more, but the quality of the silence had changed. It was not the silence of despair or of shock. It was the silence of deep, humbling comprehension. Vryn, the science officer, looked at the data again, the schematics of the litter box, the structure of the noise bomb. They are not more advanced, he murmured. They are differently advanced. Their expertise is in survival, in the management of catastrophe. It is a science we have never considered. Elvina gazed at the image of the blue-green world on the screen. She had thought of it as a place of horror, a cage of constant suffering. Now she saw it for what it was, a forge. A brutal, relentless forge that hammered resilience into the very bones of its children. They were not offering friendship as the consensus understood it. They were offering something harder and perhaps more valuable, a stark, unconditional solidarity born not of shared philosophy, but of shared instinct to endure. She thought of the refusal of the gifts. It was not pride. It was wisdom of fierce, protective wisdom. They were guarding the very thing that had saved everyone, their own wild, untamed nature. Officer Kale, she said, her voice clear. Acknowledge the message. Tell them the door is open. The quarantine is ended. We will watch for their ships, built by their hands, and we will listen for their answers. Then she addressed the entire crew, her chime resonant with a new resolve. File the report. Redesignate Sol 3, not a death world, not a guardian world, a resilient world. And note this, in any future crisis protocol, when all options are gone, the call is to be rooted there, not to their governments, to their open channels. On a rooftop in Seoul, weeks later, the air was cool. The city lights glittered below, a testament to human chaos and order woven together. Yuna and Minsu sat on a bench, sharing a bottle of soju. The first alien ships, elegant and silent, had appeared in high orbit. They did not land. They only watched, as per the agreement. The world was changing. Governments were forming a unified planetary council to deal with the consensus. There was talk, but it was slow, careful, political dot up here. It was quiet. They'll call again, you know, Minsu said, taking a small sip. Maybe not the silence. Something else. Something their peace can't handle. Yuna looked up at the stars, now knowing what was among them. She nodded. Probably. Will we answer? He asked, though he already knew. She smiled a little, a tired, genuine smile. We'll be here. In the mountains, Jihai was already designing new sensors. Not to listen for alien SOS calls, but to study the fascinating, chaotic energy signatures of the nebula where the silence had died, a nebula now rich with strange, persistent life forms from Earth. In his apartment, Jay was not playing games. He was studying the publicly released basics of galactic data networks, not to copy them, but to learn their weaknesses, to build better. More human firewalls, and in a remote forest, Tay taught a small group how to track, how to survive on nothing, how to read the land. The lessons were more popular now. People, it seemed, wanted to remember what they were. The Earth had spoken, not with a single voice of power, but with the combined, ragged voice of its nature. They had not sought a place in the galaxy's order. They had carved out a space for their beautiful, brutal disorder. They were not the galaxy's saviors. They were its emergency responders, its paramedics, its stubborn mechanics. And in the vast, quiet library of peaceful civilizations, a new short book had been added. Its title was simple, a record of fact that woe. The final moments were a silent ballet of despair aboard the Everlasting Blue. The great ship hung motionless in the void, its systems powered down to minimal levels, a silent offering to the approaching end. The gray wall of the silence now filled the forward view. It was close enough to see the texture, not a texture of anything, but a perfect, depthless absence that hurt the mind to look upon. Stars at its edge did not explode. They simply vanished as if they had never been. High Chair Ilvina watched, her internal light so dim she was nearly transparent. Her crew held each other, or sat quietly, their thoughts turning inward to final memories. Officer Kale stared at his console, where a single, blinking dot representing the Earth projectile moved with agonizing slowness towards the gigantic, hungry gray. It looked like a grain of sand thrown at a mountain. The primitive object has entered the leading edge of the phenomenon, the sensor officer announced, her voice flat. Energy signature fading. It is being consumed. Kale closed his eyes. He had dared to hope, just for a moment. It had been a foolish dream. The silence ate everything. On the main viewer, they saw it. The crude, asymmetrical pod from Earth, a tiny speck of dull metal, was touched by the gray wave. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the pod disintegrated. But it did not vanish silently. It burst. It was not an explosive burst of light and heat. It was a messy physical rupture. A cloud of particulate matter metal fragments, frozen gases, and millions of microscopic canisters bloomed into the grayness. To the consensus sensors, it was like watching a drop of ink fall into clear, still water. A brief, localized discoloration, soon to be erased. Dispersion confirmed, the sensor officer said. All particulate matter is being absorbed. No change in the silence's advance. A soft sigh of final resignation passed through the bridge. Ilvina began to form the words for a final, gracious statement of closure. Then, the sensor console emitted a sharp, discordant chime. Energy fluctuation, the officer said, confusion in her voice. Within the phenomenon. At the point of dispersal. On the screen, a perfect smooth front of the gray wave developed a blemish. A ripple, a patch of space about the size of a small planet began to churn. The gray turned darker in spots, lighter in others. It looked agitated. It is not absorbing the material efficiently. Vryn, the science officer, whispered, his body flashing with rapid, confused colors. The foreign matter is reacting. Deep within the silence, the Deathworld's package was doing its work. J-Noise bomb had been released. It was not a weapon of destruction, but of insanity. As the silence's absorption protocols latched on to the digital payload, they tried to process it, to break it down into quiet, orderly data. But the data was not orderly. It was a shrieking cacophony of human chaos. It was screaming guitars spliced into nursery rhymes, It was mathematical paradoxes. It was the violent, unpredictable noise of 8 billion lives lived in stubborn, messy defiance. The silence's systems, designed for the harmonious energies of civilized worlds, had no category for this. It was like trying to digest a scream. The alien code attempted to process it, and the chaotic algorithms mutated, generating more nonsense. Flooding the pathways. At the same time, the biological payload was activated by the raw energy of the silence itself. Min Su's counter-irritants woke up. Radiation-eating bacteria found a feast. Ultraviolet-resistant viruses attached themselves to patterns of energy, replicating in ways that made no logical sense. Bindweed seeds, programmed to grow in any condition, sent out phantom roots of crystalline energy, cracking the uniform grayness with frantic, jagged patterns of stubborn life. The silence did not feel pain. It was not alive in that way. But it was a system, and the Earth's package was a systemic shock. A shock comprised of gibberish and poison and uncontrollable growth. On the bridge of the everlasting bloom, disbelief turned to stunned awe. The gray wave was no longer a smooth wall. The ripple became a convulsion. A patch of the silence boiled like dark water. Tendrils of wrong-colored energy, sickly yellow, violent purple flashed within it, products of the chaotic data and biological reactions. The relentless advance stopped. It's halted its forward progress, the sensor officer breathed. The local zone is experiencing massive internal energy spikes. The pattern is chaotic, unreadable. It's confused, Vryn said, his voice full of wonder. The Deathworld contaminants are not being assimilated. They are causing a rejection response. Delvina's form began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter. Show me the Earthling's signal. Now. On Earth, the team was gathered in the warehouse, clustered around a single laptop linked to Jihai's observatory data feed. The screen showed a simplified version of the consensus sensor display. They saw their dot disappear. They saw the dispersion cloud appear. Then, for a long, terrifying minute, they saw nothing change. It didn't work, Jay said, his voice hollow. He looked younger suddenly, the weight of the galaxy crushing him. It was just absorbed. We were too slow, too weak. Yuna put a hand on his shoulder, her own hope crumbling. She had believed in her welds, in her machine. To see it mean nothing was a physical pain. Min Su watched the screen with a doctor's eye, looking for a vital sign. Wait, he said. On the screen, the smooth line representing the silence's edge developed a jagged spike. Then another. It's not a flat line, Min Su said, a fierce intensity in his voice. It's fibrillating. Tay leaned forward, his eyes like chips of flint. It's flinching. It hit something that bit back. He grabbed the microphone. Jihai, can you see it? From the observatory, Jihai's voice came back, tight with exhilaration. I see it. The wavefront is destabilizing. The chaotic data packet is propagating. It's not stopping it, it's infecting it. On the screen, the gray zone was now a storm of conflicting signals. The clean, awful emptiness was being replaced by a riot of nonsense energy signatures. It was like watching a silent room suddenly fill with 100 people all shouting different things. It's working, Yuna whispered, her grip tightening on Jay's shoulder. The junk is clogging the filter. More, Tay barked, instinctively shifting into a combat mindset. We hit it once. It's stunned. We need a follow-up. Jay, can you send another data burst? The same coordinates, right into the mess? Jay's fingers were already flying across a second keyboard. The channel's still open. I'm rerouting everything. Sending the secondary payload all the garbage data we couldn't fit the first time. He slammed the enter key. A second, smaller burst of digital chaos. A pure stream of undiluted nonsense. shot from Earth's networks along the same path. It was a handful of sand thrown into the eyes of a blinded giant. Aboard the everlasting bloom, they saw the new injection hit the churning zone. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the silence. A gray wave didn't just stop. It began to fracture. Cracks of pure black, not the gray of the silence, but the natural black of empty space, appeared in its surface. The psychic null field wavered, and for the first time, the crew felt something from it. Not a thought, but a sensation of violent, system-wide malfunction. Then, it simply came apart. Not with an explosion, but with a dissipation. The gray faded, like fog burned away by a sudden, harsh sun. The stolen light of the stars behind it rushed back into view. The awful pressure of nothingness lifted, replaced by the normal, comforting hum of the cosmos. The silence was gone. In its place was a faint, dissipating cloud of exotic particles, and the last, fading echoes of angry rock music and screaming. Bacteria. Absolute silence ruled the bridge of the everlasting bloom. But it was a different silence. It was the silence of shock, of awe so profound it had stolen all words. High Chair Ilvina looked at the now clear starfield, then at the blinking dot that marked Earth. The crude, ugly, beautiful missile had not been a farce. It had been a surgery. A brutal, messy, effective surgery performed by beings who understood survival in a way her civilization had forgotten. She turned to Kale, who was crying slow, steady bubbles of relief into his water mask. "Officer," she said, her voice a clear, resonant chime once more, ringing with a new understanding. "Open a channel to Earth. Use their frequency. Ask them, no, request of them." How? The bridge of the everlasting bloom was a tomb of silent despair. The final messages of refusal had ceased. A great viewing screen now showed only the steady, inevitable approach of the gray wave. It was closer now, close enough that the stars at the edge of the screen were being swallowed, not with a flash, but with a slow, sickening dimming into nothing. High Chair Ilvina stood motionless, her crystalline form holding a faint, fading light. Her crew, beings from worlds of gentle tides and calm skies, moved with a slow, mournful purpose. They were preparing for the end, securing data cores, sending final love notes to homeworlds they would never see again. The psychic atmosphere was thick with a grief so profound it had passed beyond tears into a hollow acceptance. Then, a console chimed. It was a soft, routine sound, but in the silence, it was as sharp as a shout. Communications Officer Kale, who had been quietly praying to the deep currents of his home ocean, flinched. The signal was on a secondary band, a low-priority channel used for automated beacons and deep space static. It was not a consensus frequency. The origin point made his heart stutter. Sol-3. He almost deleted it. What could the Deathworld possibly say? A primal scream? A curse? But his duty, and the last flicker of that desperate hope, compelled him to open it. The message was not clean. It was a brutal burst of raw data, compressed and harsh. The translation matrix struggled, parsing it into broken, jarring galactic common. Stand by. Solution incoming. Do not engage silence. Let it come to you, Earth. That was it. No formal greetings. No identification of authority. Just a command from a species the galaxy had written off as feral, delivered with the tone of someone stating a simple fact. Beneath the words was a torrent of ancillary data, schematics, chemical formulae, biological markers, and a swirling, chaotic digital signature that made Kale's head ache. It was not elegant. It was a wild, sprawling, ugly thing. With trembling hands, Kale rooted it to the high chair station. Ilvina's form brightened a fraction as she absorbed the message. A ripple of confusion passed through the bridge crew as the content was shared. A solution? Ilvina's Sisheim was faint with disbelief. From the Death World? What does it propose? The ship's chief scientist, a slender being of light and logic named Vryn, analyzed the data packet. His appendages moved over his console, his body pulsing with colors of confusion and disdain. High Chair, it is. Nonsense. It is not a coherent weapon system. It is a collection of primitive concepts. There is a proposal for a digital contagion designed to cause system overload through irrational data patterns. There are specifications for biological samples extremophile microorganisms, aggressive plant life, terrestrial viral vectors. It is a list of poisons and irritants. And the delivery method appears to be a crude chemical rocket dispersion pod. It is not a solution. It is a littering of hazardous materials. A wave of derisive flickers passed through the bridge. Some saw it as an insult, a final mockery from a savage world. Others saw it as the pathetic, misguided gesture of children throwing sand at a tsunami. Ilvina looked at the data. She saw the chaos, the lack of refined technology. But she also saw something else. She saw no fear in the message, no resignation, only a blunt, almost impatient instruction. Let it come to you. Where is this solution now? She asked. VRIN checked. Sensors detect a low-energy launch from the Deathworld surface. A single projectile. Its trajectory is on an intercept course with the leading edge of the silence. Estimated time to arrival, 27 cycles. It will reach the wave just as the wave reaches our forward perimeter. Its velocity is negligible, another officer said. Its composition is primitive alloys and pressurized canisters. It possesses no shields, no energy weapons, no psychic dampeners. The silence will consume it in a microcycle. Ilvina stared at the approaching gray wall on the screen. The elegant, hopeless logic of her civilization said this was the end. The Deathworld's message was illogical, crude, born of a place that did not understand the peace of surrender. She made her decision. Hold position, she said, her voice gaining a sliver of its old strength. Do not engage. Do not move. Let the silence come, and let the projectile from Earth proceed. A murmur of shock went through the crew. It was one thing to accept death. It was another to pin a futile hope on a bottle of poison thrown by a primitive. High Chair, surely we should spend our final moments in meditation, not in watching this. Farce, Vryn pleaded. We have done all that our science and our peace have allowed us to do. Ilvina replied, her light steadying. It has failed. Now we will see what their chaos can do. Officer Kale acknowledged the message. Kale, his heart pounding, sent a simple pulse. Message received. Standing by. He did not know if it was hope or madness he felt. On Earth, there was no grand command center. The operation was run from 3 locations, linked by a fragile, encrypted network that Jay defended like a fortress. In a rented warehouse on the outskirts of Seoul, Yuna and Tae worked. The dispersion pod, nicknamed the litter box by Jay, sat in the middle of the concrete floor. It was not pretty. Yuna had built it from a repurposed fuel tank, scavenged thruster blocks from decommissioned satellites, and a guidance computer she had pulled from a junked airliner. Wires snaked everywhere. Tae, a man with a weathered face and hands that looked like they could break stone, was methodically loading the biological canisters. Each was labeled with Minsu's precise handwriting. Deinococcus radiodurans, tardigrade samples, bindweed seeds, engineered bacteriophage cocktail, poison seeds and unkillable bugs. Tae grunted, sealing a canister into its slot. We're not sending a hero. We're sending a plague. That's the idea, Yuna said, welding a final plate. Her hands were sure. This was just another repair job, the biggest one of her life. Jay, How's the payload looking on your end? In his apartment, Jay was in his element. On his main screen, a beautiful, terrifying galaxy of code swirled. This was the noise bomb. He had not written a single virus. He had created a digital ecosystem. It contained fragments of every human thing he could think of. Pop music played backward. Static from old televisions. Trauma codes from hospital monitors. The screech of breaking subway trains. Millions of lines of random numbers. And at its core, a self-modifying algorithm that would rewrite itself into more nonsense upon any attempt at analysis. It was designed not to attack, but to be consumed, to flood the silence's processing pathways with meaningless, indigestible chaos. Payload is green and ugly, Jay said, his voice crackling over the speaker. It's ready to be the worst meal anyone's ever eaten. Ji-Hai, you got the package? At the observatory, Ji-Hai was alone. She had sent her assistants away, citing a personal project. On her console, the navigational data was locked in. She had calculated the intercept point, not as a static location, but as a slice of space-time, where the Silence's wavefront would meet the consensus fleet. Her contribution was the aim. She had turned Yuna's scrap rocket into a precision delivery system. The final piece was a compressed data burst containing a simplified, visual representation of their plan, a last attempt to tell the aliens what was coming. The coordinates are loaded, she said, her voice calm. The firing solution is as good as it can be with these parts. Minsu, are the biologicals stable? From a small lab he had borrowed at the hospital, Minsu monitored the readings. He viewed the canisters not as weapons, but as medical samples. He had insisted on certain parameters. The organisms had to be in a state of suspended animation, ready to activate upon exposure to energy, like spores waiting for rain. Vital signs are dormant, but strong, he said, using a doctor's language for life that refused to quit. The delivery mechanism will rupture the canisters on dispersal? Yes, Yuna confirmed. A shaped charge. It'll blow the whole mess into a wide area cloud right in its face. There was a pause on the line. The reality of what they were doing settled over them. They were not a government. They were not soldiers. They were a mechanic, a doctor, a hacker, a scientist, and a survivalist, trying to save a galaxy they had just learned existed. Do we tell anyone? Jay asked quietly. Who would believe us? Ji-Hai responded. And if they did, they would try to stop us. Or take over. And they would be too slow. Tay's voice cut in, firm and final. We don't ask for permission on a death world. We survive. We act. That's what we're doing. Yuna, is the bird ready to fly? Yuna stepped back from the welded pod. It sat there, a monument to human stubbornness and junk. It's as ready as it'll ever be. On the main shared screen, a countdown initiated. It was sensed to a launch window from an old, mostly forgotten space agency launch pad in a remote region. They had not asked to use it. Jay had. Arranged access. Good, Tay said. Then let's go make some noise. The strange signal did not vanish. It persisted. It was a ghost in the machine, a piece of digital grit that kept jamming the gears of the world's oldest, most forgotten systems. It bled into ham radio bands, creating a low, whispering static that sounded, some said, like a sigh from an empty room. It corrupted backup servers in remote locations, filling them with images of gray nothingness. It was a puzzle, and on a world of 8 billion souls, there were always those who could not leave a puzzle alone. In a mountain observatory in Chile, a woman named Ji-Hai stared at a screen that should have been showing the tranquil dance of distant galaxies. Instead, it displayed a cascade of errors. It was the third time this week. Her colleagues blamed solar flares, or perhaps a new satellite's interference. But Ji Hai was an astrophysicist who had built her career studying things that didn't fit. Odd radio signals, anomalous star flickers, the whispers of deep space. This fit a pattern, but not a natural one. The error data, when she isolated it, had a structure. It was a message, horribly compressed and fragmented, but a message nonetheless. She worked through the night, her coffee going cold. She used software of her own design, tools meant to piece together cosmic noise into something understandable. Slowly, painfully, the signal began to cohere. It wasn't words. It was raw data. Telemetry of a star system's death. Spectrographic analyses of an energy field that devoured everything. And layered beneath it, a psychic imprint, faint and fading, of a collective, final scream. Ji Hai sat back in her chair, her blood running cold. This was not human. The technology to send this, the scope of the disaster it recorded. It was extraterrestrial. And it was a distress call. A desperate one. She looked from her screen to the clear, cold night sky through the observatory dome. The threat was out there, and it was coming. A feeling, not of fear, but of furious purpose, settled in her chest. They had sent this here. Why? In a small, messy apartment in Seoul, a young man named Che was about to win a very difficult online game. His fingers flew across the keyboard. His entire world narrowed to the screen. Then his connection spiked. Latency, the enemy of every gamer, turned his perfect victory into a frozen, glitched mess. He slammed his desk in frustration. Again. He shouted to the empty room. This was the third time this week his premium internet had been hijacked by what looked like random noise. But Che was not just a gamer. He was a prodigy in systems theory and chaos dynamics. He saw the world as a series of interlocking, fragile codes. Annoyed, he decided to trace the interference. He dove into the data stream, not with astronomical software, but with the tools of a hacker and a puzzle solver. Where Ji Hai saw a cosmic tragedy, Jay saw architecture. He saw the silence, as the data packet labeled it, not as a force, but as a system. A very efficient, very hungry system. It had protocols for absorption, for conversion. It was, in his terms, a perfect piece of invasive code, consuming the reality around it. It's a parasite, he muttered to himself, his aim forgotten. A universe-scale parasite. And it's got a bug. It doesn't know how to handle junk data. A wild idea began to form in his mind. In her salvage yard, Yuna was trying to get an old military-grade radio set, a relic from the last century, to work. She liked the challenge. But the thing wouldn't stop picking up the same fragment of bizarre signal. It wasn't voice. It was like the sound of tearing metal, and then absolute quiet. She'd heard similar sounds before. The moment a power grid fails, the squeal of a motor burning out. It was the sound of a system dying. She'd saved the corrupted data from her tablet, more out of a technician's habit than anything else. On a whim, she ran a simple analysis, looking for power signatures. The results were impossible. The energy levels spiked to magnitudes that dwarfed anything on Earth, then fell to absolute zero. What kind of breaker trips that hard? She wondered aloud. Meanwhile, Min-Soo was researching. The pattern he'd seen on the E monitor haunted him. He found medical forums where other technicians reported similar, fleeting glitches on diagnostic machines worldwide. He cross-referenced it with amateur astronomy blogs talking about strange radio interference. He was a man trained to find the cause of a patient's collapse by connecting disparate symptoms. A global simultaneous glitch affecting both medical and communication equipment was not a coincidence. It was a symptom. But of what? He found an obscure post on a fringe science board, a rant by someone named Starbreaker about an alien distress signal. Most of it was nonsense, but it mentioned the specific fractal pattern of system failure he'd seen. He sent a private message, his doctor's mind seeking a second opinion. The reply came from Tay, and it was blunt. Patterns of predators stalking path. Seen it before. Not in space. In jungles. You a doctor? Meet me. Secure chat. He included a link to an encrypted server. One by one, they were gathered. Chi, needing computational power and a fresh perspective, reached out to contacts in the global data mining community. Her path crossed with Jay's online signature, a unique method of parsing chaotic data. She contacted him. Yuna, frustrated and curious, posted the technical specs of the interference on an engineering forum, seeking help. Jay saw it, recognizing the energy signatures from his own work. He reached out. The encrypted chat server, set up by the mysterious Tay, became their meeting room. There were no real names at first. Just handles. Starbreaker, G. wrote, "The signal is authentic." Origin, extrasolar. Content, a record of an existential threat. A wave of nullification. They are broadcasting a plea for help, because their science has no solution. Cisraptor J responded, confirmed. I've modeled the threat entity. It operates on consumption protocols. It's like a filter feeder, but for all energy and data. It expects order. It breaks complex systems down into simple components and absorbs them. Scrap Queen, Yuna, added, the power drain signature is instantaneous and total, like a dead short across reality. Anything we send against, it would be drained before it got close. You can't fight a black hole with a flashlight. Silent Tay finally spoke. His voice was gravelly, direct, over audio. You're all thinking like scientists or engineers. You're not thinking like prey, or like the thing that eats the prey. I've watched predators hunt. The big, silent ones? They rely on everything running away in a nice, predictable pattern. They get confused by chaos, by things that fight back in ways that don't make sense. This silence is the ultimate predator. It expects civilized victims. It expects surrender. Mend Minsu joined the audio. His voice was calm, measured. Tay is right, in a way. In medical terms, this is an aggressive metastatic condition. It consumes healthy systems. Standard treatment and direct attack would be consumed. We need a different approach. A counter-irritant. Something that triggers a catastrophic immune response in the entity itself. A silence fell over the chat, but it was a thoughtful one. The pieces from their different worlds began to click together. J spoke, excitement in his voice. So we don't send a weapon. We send a virus, not to destroy its code, but to overload it. We send noise. Bad, chaotic, meaningless noise. We send so much junk data it chokes. Yuna built on it. And we package it in something it has to try to eat. Something that looks like energy, but is really a container for your chaos virus and Minsu's counter-irritant. Jihai's mind raced through the physics. The signal originated from a specific vector. We can calculate a return trajectory. Our delivery system wouldn't need to be advanced. It would just need to get the package to the right coordinates and disperse it. And what's the counter-irritant? Minsu asked. Tay gave a short, harsh laugh. From a death world. We send it a taste of this place. We send it things that don't die easy. Radiation-eating bacteria. Viruses that hijack cells. Seeds that crack rock to grow. We send it life that fights. We make it sick. The plan was insane. It was a patchwork of astronomy, hacking, trauma medicine, guerrilla warfare, and reckless engineering. It was not a unified theory. It was a fistful of thrown gravel aimed at a god. Jihai took a deep breath. On her screen, The final translated play from the alien senders flashed. Is there nitrogen monoxide answer? She typed, her message appearing for them all to see. They sent this because no one else could help. No one else would even try. They are civilized. We are not. We are from Earth. Our answer will not be clean, or polite, or certain. But it will be an answer. One by one, in their separate rooms, they agreed. The call had been heard. Now they had to shout back. The view from the bridge of the Galactic Consensus flagship, Everlasting Bloom, was meant to be a serene thing. It was a panorama of deep space, a tapestry of stars against an infinite velvet dark. High Chair Ilvina, a being whose form resembled a graceful willow of living crystal and soft bark, stood before it. Her species, the Veil, had evolved on a world of gentle light and perpetual calm. For 1,000 cycles, they had guided the consensus with wisdom and peace. Now, the view was not serene. It was a window onto an ending, just beyond the effective. Range of the sensors. The star known as Collinear Prime was dying. But it was not a natural death. It was being erased. A wave of something not dark, but a draining, hollow gray was moving across the system. They called it the Silence. It left no debris, no energy signature, nothing. It was not a weapon. It was an unmaking. Report, Ilvina said, her voice a soft chime that conveyed a depth of sorrow. A junior officer, a gal whose moist skin shimmered with anxious patterns, answered. The wave continues its advance at 0.75 light speed. All attempts at communication cease upon contact. All energy signatures, from reactor plasma to bioelectric fields, are absorbed. Scans of post-contact space reveal nothing, not even background radiation. It is a perfect null. On the main viewer, they watched as the gray wave touched the outermost planet of the system. The planet did not explode. It simply faded. One moment it was a distinct orb of rock and ice. The next it was a ghostly silhouette, and it was gone, as if wiped from a canvas. The star itself began to dim at the edges, its fiery corona being siphoned away into the hungry, silent gray. And the broadcast? Ilvina asked, the chime in her voice now brittle. The final SOS from the Collinear civilization has stopped, the officer said. The silence consumed the transmission source 17 cycles ago. A heavy, psychic quiet filled the bridge. Every species aboard could feel it, a cold void where the vibrant psychic hum of 1 billion lives had once been. The silence ate light, energy, and thought. It was the absolute end of all things the consensus held dear. Open all channels, Ilvina commanded, her crystalline body dimming slightly. Universal distress frequency. Broadcast the full sensor data, the telemetry, everything we have on the Silence. Request immediate assistance, strategic consultation, any and all ideas. There are no protocols for this, only a plea. Across the vast, interconnected galaxy, the signal went out. The Everlasting Bloom was a venerable ship, its authority recognized by 100 advanced species. Its distress call was a siren that should have brought the might of civilization to bear. Responses began to flicker in. They appeared as holographic. Projections in the center of the bridge, figures of light and energy, representing leaders and thinkers from worlds of great beauty and power. The first was a shimmering energy being from the cores of suns. The phenomenon violates fundamental laws of physics we consider immutable. Our science has no framework for this. We cannot answer. The second was a collective hive mind of floating, intelligent fungi. Their voice was a chorus. The psychic null is absolute. It is the antithesis of consciousness. To engage is to seek oblivion. We will fortify our mental borders. We cannot answer. A third, a species of elegant, slow-moving stone shaper from a high-gravity world. We have analyzed the energy absorption rates. Any physical weapon, any shield, would be drained before impact. Our might is meaningless. We cannot answer. One by one, they came. Leaders of empires, masters of technology, ancient psychic collectives. Each message was a variation on a theme. Horror, resignation, helplessness. It is unstoppable. Our condolences. May you find peace in the final quiet. No one can answer this call. Ilvina listened to each, her form growing still and faint. The hopeful light that had glowed within her crystal structure guttered like a dying candle. The galaxy's great powers were admitting defeat before the battle had even been joined. The bridge crew, a diverse array of beings from peaceful, stable worlds, was engulfed in a wave of despair so thick it felt like a physical pressure. In a secluded communications bay, away from the main bridge's crushing atmosphere, Junior Communications Officer Kale worked. Kale was a Tova, an amphibious humanoid from a world of shallow, warm seas. His people were not known for bravery, but for meticulous attention to detail and a deep, instinctual aversion to endings. The finality of the silence terrified him on a primal level dot as the messages of refusal stacked up on his screen. A frantic, illogical thought began to form. The directory is not complete. Not every world has been asked. He called up the database of known sentient species, filtering out the major powers, then the minor ones, then the pre-contact protectorates. The list dwindled. His three-fingered hands trembled as he scrolled. His eyes settled on an entry, flagged with bright, warning hues of red and black. It was a recent addition, a report from a long-range survey probe. World designation, SOL-3 local. Name, Earth classification, CLASS-12 Deathworld. Extreme hostility quarantine. Atmosphere, toxic oxygen-nitrogen mix, corrosive to most non-native biologies. Gravity, high within functional limits but straining. Biosphere, hyper-aggressive, predatory, competitive. Dominant species, Homo sapiens, adaptive, resilient, and lethally ingenious. Note, planetary environment is in a state of constant violent flux. Recommended, non-interaction. Quarantine until further study can determine containment protocols. A death world. A place where life fought for every moment of existence with tooth and claw and poison. A place of storms, volcanoes, and predators that pursued prey for the sheer persistence of it. To the civilized species of the consensus, it was a nightmare. A cosmic mistake. Kale looked at the main feed, where High Chair Ilvina was now broadcasting a somber, final message of resignation to the fleet. The silence was hours away. This was the end. No, Kale thought, a strange, defiant spark igniting in his nervous heart. Not every answer comes from a place of peace. Sometimes the answer must come from a place that understands the fight, that it was a breach of 1,000 protocols. It was an act of pure, desperate madness. With a trembling hand, he isolated the master distress packet, the full screen of the dying colonor system, the sensor logs of the unstoppable gray wave, the everlasting Bloom's own telemetry. He set a destination, not to a government or a science directorate, but to the planet-wide data networks of this quarantine death world, a primitive electromagnetic chatter they used for communication. He routed the signal through every available buffer, knowing it would arrive as a distorted, chaotic burst of noise across their crude information networks. They would likely see it as a system error, a corrupted file, a piece of meaningless space static. He pressed the execute command. The packet vanished into the void, aimed at the vicious, beautiful, terrible blue marble called Earth. There, Kale whispered to the empty bay, his voice barely a bubble in the water of his breathing mask. Someone else has been asked. On Earth, in a city called Sol, the night was loud and bright. Lights from towering buildings fought against the dark, and the constant hum of life filled the air. in a cluttered salvage yard on the city's edge. A woman named Yuna was elbow-deep in the guts of a broken industrial robot. Her hands were smudged with grease, and she wielded a plasma torch with weary expertise. Her old tablet, propped on a crate, was playing a low-brow drama, but the screen flickered suddenly. The actors' faces dissolved into a frantic impossible scramble of geometric shapes and a deep sub-auditory rumble that made her teeth ache. She smacked the side of the tablet. "Useless junk," she muttered, and the signal cleared. She shook her head, dismissing it as another glitch in the city's overwhelmed networks. But for a second, she had seen a pattern in the chaos that looked like a starfield going dark, one by one. Across the city, in the stark, bright emergency room of a major hospital, a man named Min-Soo was suturing a deep laceration on a construction worker's arm. His movements were calm, precise, and utterly focused, a rock in the storm of beeping monitors and shouted orders. The chaos of the AE was his natural habitat. The display on a nearby diagnostic machine, meant to show a steady heart rhythm, suddenly flatlined into a jagged, impossible pattern before resolving into a wash of gray static. A nurse cursed, rebooting the machine. Min-Soo glanced at it, his sharp eyes missing nothing. The static had looked organized, almost like a fractal of spreading cracks. It was the same pattern he saw in the scans of a body going into systemic shock, when systems began to fail one after another. He filed the strange observation away in the back of his mind, a curious anomaly in a night of very human trauma. The signal, Kale's desperate bottle thrown into a cosmic ocean, had crashed onto the shores of Earth. It was broken, distorted, and mostly ignored. But in its corrupted data streams, it carried the scream of a dying star and the profile of an unstoppable enemy. And on a death world, where survival was a daily puzzle, some minds were uniquely wired to notice patterns of impending doom. The call had been sent. It had not yet been heard, but it had arrived.